I have always believed that dreams were the gateway to one's creative fascination, and I have always treasured mine. That's why I have a journal which records every single dream I've had since 2018, and I wanted to share my favorite from each year. I was a peasant set in Korea during the dynasty era. Apparently, during an execution, I threw a stick at the queen to save the guy about to be executed because he was one of my closest friends. But due to my outrageous action against the queen, there was a huge uproar as the soldiers started chasing the crowd, trying to find the person who threw the stick. The panicked civilians and I started running down the hill to escape, and I eventually reached a village. I searched for a good place to hide, and I noticed a rundown 4-storied apartment. In the middle of a Joseon dynasty, I entered the first floor, which was a small and cozy inn. The owner immediately understood that I was in trouble and gave me men's clothes to disguise myself and told me to blend myself with the other customers. So I sat down near the back of the room, near the window with a cup of water. Eventually, one of the soldiers entered the inn to search for the rebel. He stood near the door, watching and making notes about each customer. People started leaving slowly over time until it was just me and this man across my table, whom I confided my troubles to, and had agreed to help me just before the soldier came inside. A few minutes later, the soldier left and I breathed a sigh of relief and tried to sneak out, when I realized that I could see him through the window and he was waiting outside. For me! I immediately sat back down as the man who agreed to help me came over to my desk with some cake. I mouthed to him, "He's still there," but he only nodded his head and started slicing up the cake. At this point, I was scared out of the wazoo, but then I asked the guy if I could have some of his cake? Like, even in my dreams, I was still a fat ass. He kept nodding, and I realized that he was stalling for time so the soldiers could capture me. That traitor! So I burst out of the inn and ran into the road, looking both ways to see which way I should run. Then, in the distance, I see 2 guys sprinting towards me. One had black hair and had a carefree personality, and the other one had blonde hair but with a seriously intense aura. He was the one I freed from being executed. They took out the soldier together and greeted me. Apparently, us 3 were really close and had rebelled against the queen multiple times. And then, out of nowhere, a group of boys appeared and said they were a Chinese boy band? 2 of the members had blonde hair and the rest had dark hair. They excitedly showed us their recent music video, but I was busy staring at one of the members with wavy blonde hair. Me and my group of friends were orphans. We were abandoned kids who were a sore sight to the rich and snobbish nobles. One of our favorite activities to do was to sneak inside this elegant theater for the sophisticated, sitting at the very top and enjoying the shows or the music like everyone else. But then it got really dark, so we had to return back to our base, which we set up inside this market a few months back and nobody noticed. We got our sleeping bags near the entrance, where the moonlight shone through. Thunder was rumbling and I was almost lulled to sleep when I realized that we didn't stock up any food for breakfast tomorrow. So I grabbed my flashlight and ventured towards the darkness. When I was near the aisles, I heard a sound which did not sound like the thunder and realized that someone was coming. I hid and prayed that the person would not find me, but as the lightning struck, it illuminated the dark room and the person and I made eye contact. It was just the janitor, thank God. He didn't say anything and even let us stay the night. When the morning came, we hit the road once more. The city was full of wooden houses stacked on top of each other in a cramped, suffocating manner, with a steampunk-like aesthetic. Me and the black-haired guy were walking around a small local park, where we met up with a dude with blonde hair on the swings. We were just hanging around until we noticed a little girl crying and wandering around the neighborhood. So we approached her and asked if we could take her back home. But for some reason, we couldn't find her house inside the complex and overwhelming housing structure. I asked one of the locals for guidance, but they said that she lived in one of those houses without a number plate because they couldn't afford a real house. So me and the guys and the little girl hung out in one of the rich people's houses, where other families were also there to socialize. I told the girl to go play with the other kids as me and the guys went exploring around the house because we heard some creepy things going around, like the murders being committed in the neighborhood. We split up and looked around where we obviously shouldn't be. I descended to this basement where I noticed an old man sitting in a wheelchair, talking to someone who I couldn't see. I crept back upstairs, met with one of the guys and headed home. Next day, us three were walking to school and came across two kids from the rich family from yesterday. We passed by them and thought nothing as we just kept walking. After school, we decided to take one of our secret passages back home. When we came across the bodies of the two kids, lifelessly slumped next to each other on the ground, we started freaking out when I suddenly realized that the killer was her mom. I remembered her strange behavior yesterday and that she was the one talking to the shady grandpa in the basement. But as soon as I came to that conclusion, we heard voices behind us and couldn't escape. I was traveling in the meadows with a free-spirited and wandering songster named Sonnet. He and I arrived at a nearby town, which rested on a slope between a forest and a grassland. We found a Gothic-style hotel to stay in, and then a grumpy and unfriendly-looking man approached us. For some reason, all three of us decided to get a room together, but was stuck inside because there was a creep wandering around the halls. So me and Sonnet came up with the plan to trip him up. And as we were about to execute it, the grumpy man surprisingly decided to lend us a hand. We eventually caught the bastard, and then he suddenly decided that it was enough fooling around and returned back to the countryside to take care of his sick grandma. After that commotion, we were chilling in the hotel ground floor when out of nowhere, there was this weird rap contest between one of the BTS members and some random gangster rapper. And for some reason, Sonnet, who I must remind you is a singer and not a rapper, decided to join the BTS's side in the rap battle. They all dueled it out while I just watched from the crowds. Eventually, BTS and Sonnet won the battle. But the finishing line they delivered had such a personal impact on the gangster, he turned into a massive dragon and then swallowed two kids up. So, for context, this was my first time ever living in a dorm, which I shared with a roommate. I was writing this massive essay for one of my classes while also working on my personal animation project, barely powering through with a pack of Mountain Dew. As I was staring at the computer screen like a zombie, typing like 2 words per minute, I suddenly started to feel sick. Really sick. I felt a headache coming in and I was sweating everywhere. So I just decided to quit working for the day and lay down to watch some videos before sleep. As I was scrolling through Alas content, I came across a video which would become the source of my nightmares. The Black Cat Narrow by Attease. I naively thought, I like cats, so why not check it out? And at exactly 45 seconds in, I saw him. Now, usually I don't get scared that easily, but I was really sick and homesick and laying in the dark because I lived in a roommate and couldn't sleep with the lights on. After that jump scare, I stopped watching and immediately turned off my phone. So as I slowly drifted off to sleep, I realized that I couldn't move. All I could see was a faint outline of my roommate's closet, and at the edge of my peripheral vision was this really tall figure that touched the ceiling. It was shrouded in dark, but I could see that it had the same creepy eyes as the guy from the music video, and it was just staring down at me. The eyes seemed to get bigger and closer, and finally, I could shift my arms slightly, so I sat up as quickly as I could, which in reality was probably more like this, and turned to see that the figure had disappeared. I don't think I did justice explaining how terrifyingly helpless I felt that night. Sleep paralysis has always been something I was afraid to experience, so as soon as it ended, I went back to working on my projects because I was too much of a coward to sleep. This happened during my trip to Korea over summer. I was laying in the hotel room, getting ready for sleep as I had the genius idea to listen to music with my earphones on for maximum immersion. I think I was almost fully asleep, like I felt like I was dreaming, but I could still understand what songs were blasting in my ear. Does that make sense? Anyways, when I reached to the end of the playlist, it autoplayed into other songs that the system recommended to me. But one of them in particular started off with the girl just quietly narrating her story in an eerie silence with a creepily calm voice. She told a story of living in a city where she felt that she could not belong. One person asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, but she couldn't answer that question because she didn't know. But as soon as she hesitated, everybody stopped whatever they were doing to stare at her blankly. The girl quickly covered up her mistake and gave a somewhat satisfying answer. and the people went about their days as if nothing was wrong. But she knew that she was now being closely watched by everyone for that small blunder. During the night, it was absolutely forbidden for anyone to look up at the stars for some reason. So she dared to oppose and proudly looked up at the night sky, only to realize that there were no stars, and that she was tricked into revealing herself as a defect among the other obedient civilians. She met a little boy who assured her that he was the same as her, an outcast, and offered his help. Motherfucker! Attis again! You guys ever heard of a K-pop group traumatizing someone not once, but twice? Ugh. I mean, at least their songs are good. Maybe I'll do like one of those fanfiction reading videos about them, and I can give my guy Hongjun the respect he deserves. Okay, so I actually went back to read that narration of that girl from my last stream, and the actual story had a more positive message, something along the lines of like, oh, don't be afraid to be different, everyone's special, but I only got nightmares instead.